Okay, so you want in on the iPhone business. You've seen the numbers. A phone sells for $999, sometimes $1,500. Teardown analyses put the actual components inside. The screen, the chip, the camera, the battery, at somewhere between $400 and $550. Sell a slab of glass for double what it costs to build. Open a few glass stores. Watch people line up around the block to hand you money. And you're not wrong. It is one of the highest margin consumer electronics products ever made. There is just one problem. The iPhone was never actually what people were paying for. Take away the margin is real, but it's explaining the wrong business. Roughly 1.2 billion smartphones sell globally every year, most of them fighting over margins measured in single digits. One company sells less than 20% of the world's phones and still captures somewhere between 75 and 85% of the entire industry's profit. Read that gap again. A company selling a fifth of the units takes home 4/5 of the money. Somewhere between the factory floor and your pocket, a different asset got built, not a phone, an ecosystem. And it's worth more than the phone that sits on top of it. Takeaway, the phone is the entry fee. The ecosystem is the business. So let's open one of these stores. First thing you'd discover, you can't. Apple doesn't franchise. No licensing deal, no royalty structure, no outside ownership path exists anywhere in this business. Every single Apple store on Earth answers to one company. That tells you something before we've discussed a dollar. This isn't a business built to be shared. It's built to be controlled completely. Because control is the entire point. Walk into a flagship store on a Saturday afternoon and count the employees, who aren't selling anything at all. The Genius Bar sits at the back like a hospital waiting room. Technicians in matching shirts fixing cracked screens, replacing batteries, walking a 68-year-old customer through setting up her new phone, one step at a time for free. A woman comes in furious. Her phone won't charge. 3 days before a flight. 20 minutes later, she walks out with a working phone. No invoice, no upsell. Already telling a friend on the sidewalk how easy that was. Any normal retailer calls that a cost center and shuts it down. Apple built the entire architecture of the store around it. Takeaway, the free repair isn't a service. It's the credibility factory. Here's the part that gets missed. A customer walking through those glass doors isn't evaluating aluminum. They're evaluating certainty, that the device works exactly as promised, that the data transfers cleanly, that if something breaks in year 2, a real person, in a real building fixes it without an argument. That certainty is expensive to build. Apple stores generate more revenue per square foot than any major retailer on Earth. North of $5,000 annually, several times a luxury jeweler. Flagship rent alone can run into the tens of millions a year. None of it matters if the certainty isn't real. Takeaway, you're not paying for the store. You're paying to trust the store. Now picture launch weekend. Outside a Fifth Avenue store, a line wraps the block before sunrise. Campers in folding chairs. A live stream camera pointed at the door. A countdown clock ticking toward 8 a.m. Apple's supply chain is sophisticated enough to flood every shelf on day 1. They don't. They deliberately let the line form because the photo of that line, on every news channel by lunch, is worth more than any ad campaign money could buy. Scarcity here isn't a limitation. It's a decision. Takeaway, the shortage is manufactured, and it's manufacturing something more valuable than phones' attention. Rewind to 1997. Apple is roughly 90 days from running out of cash. A decade spent competing on raw specs against Windows PCs that were, in most practical ways, just as capable and dramatically cheaper. Market share collapsed. The board brought back a co-founder they'd pushed out 10 years earlier. And the company sat in a room asking one uncomfortable question. If we can't win on faster processors, what exactly are we selling? The answer wasn't a better chip. It was a different question entirely. Stop competing on spec sheets. Start competing on how the product makes someone feel the moment they open the box. Takeaway, Apple didn't survive by building a better computer. It survived by refusing to keep having that argument. That's the same lesson Swiss watchmakers learned surviving the quartz crisis a generation earlier. Once every competitor can build something functionally identical, the company that survives is the one that stopped selling the object and started selling belongings. Here's where that philosophy shows up on the balance sheet today. Services, the App Store, iCloud, Apple Music,
Apple Care, one bundled revenue line generating well over $85 billion a year, at margins regularly estimated above 70%, dramatically higher than hardware. Every app sold through the App Store hands Apple a cut, historically 30%. You didn't buy a phone.
You bought a small membership into a walled garden, and every transaction inside that garden, for years afterward, pays a toll. Takeaway: the hardware sale happens once, the toll never stops. In most businesses, the company sells you something once and hopes you return in a few years. Here, the object is the opening chapter of a subscription, a bridge into a relationship where your photos, your messages, and your passwords all live somewhere you'd have to actively choose to leave. It's also fragile precisely because of that. In Brussels, regulators forced the company to allow alternative app stores and sideloading. In American courtrooms, the App Store's 30% commission became the subject of federal antitrust litigation. A wall this profitable eventually invites someone to ask why the wall exists at all. Takeaway: the moat that makes the money is the same moat that draws the lawsuits. Now the numbers. Roughly 230 million iPhones sold a year. Average price near $900, about $207 billion in hardware revenue. Enormous, and still lower margin than the services division sitting quietly beside it. Now imagine a company selling half as many phones, with no app store, no subscriptions, no recurring toll behind it. Same beautiful hardware, same price. A structurally weaker business, entirely dependent on convincing the same person to make one enormous decision every few years, with nothing recurring in between. Takeaway: fewer phones with a toll booth beats more phones with none. That's the paradox at the center of modern tech. The goal was never maximizing units off the shelf this quarter. It's maximizing how permanently a customer's digital life gets entangled with yours. The companies that understood that early stopped calling themselves hardware manufacturers and started acting like landlords of a digital ecosystem. The ones that kept competing purely on specs, Nokia, BlackBerry, are case studies now, not competitors. So close the loop. You study the component costs. You study the retail footprint. You study the margin on the box, and it genuinely is extraordinary. But the phone in your hand was never the product. Not the aluminum, not the chip, not even the camera everyone photographs it with. The true product is belonging. Confidence that the messages arrive the way you expect. Confidence that the photos are already backed up somewhere you trust. Confidence that switching to anything else means rebuilding a small digital life from scratch. The hardware can be copied. Competitors have copied the screen, the camera, the design language. The walled garden, years of purchases and habits sitting quietly in someone's pocket, cannot. The phone was just the door. The garden was always the business.